This episode is brought to you by Google Gemini. With the Gemini app, you can talk live and have a real-time conversation with an AI assistant. It's great for all kinds of things, like if you want to practice for an upcoming interview, ask for advice on things to do in a new city, or brainstorm creative ideas. And by the way, this script was actually read by Gemini. Download the Gemini app for iOS and Android today. Must be 18 plus to use Gemini Live.
When you check out at the pharmacy, you see the journey from idea to medicine, thanks to our intellectual property system, or IP for short. IP safeguards inventions, like a new way to prevent seizures or lower cholesterol. And IP supports competition from other brands, then lower-cost generics, which are 90% of prescriptions filled in the U.S. Innovation, competition, lower costs, thanks to IP. Learn more at phrma.org/IP Works Wonders.
Hey, How To listeners, this is Carvel Wallace. We're off again this week, so we're bringing you the second in our two-part series on how to talk politics with your parents without yelling. And this week, Jenn and her brother attempted to flip the script with their dad by figuring out what shaped their different beliefs. It's a fascinating listen with a lot of lessons for how to navigate our current political moment. So I'm going to turn the mic back over to our former host, Amanda Ripley, and we'll see you back here next year with a fresh new episode. Happy holidays.
Testing 1, 2. Okay, it is Jenn here, and I am a little nervous about tomorrow, but, it's going to be what it's going to be. My dad did spend the night tonight at my brother's house, too, so he's upstairs. They're all watching football or something. So, yeah, we'll all be waking up in the morning kind of, hopefully not getting ready for battle, but I don't know, getting ready for something different than what we've done before.
Welcome to How To. I'm Amanda Ripley.
All right, Todd, maybe come a little bit closer because I'm kind of pointed toward me.
Today is the day we've been waiting for. We're going to see if one American family can flip the usual tortured, tedious script for arguing about politics and do something way more interesting.
Like, the goals here are not to make anyone look stupid. The goals are not to win an argument or change someone to...
This isn't a debate team exercise.
This is not a debate team exercise.
That's a good point. It's not a debate.
It's not a debate. It's a conversation. It's an exploration.
On last week's show, siblings Jenn and Todd Brandel got a marathon coaching session from Mónica Guzmán, author of I Never Thought of It That Way: How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times.
Conversations about politics are proxies for so many other ways that we just want to be understood.
Mónica prepared them for how to have a hard conversation in a new way, with the goal being understanding, not agreement. This is something she knows a lot about from talking to her own parents and from her day job at Braver Angels, an organization working to depolarize America. We heard a lot of surprising and useful tips in that episode, so if you haven't listened, definitely check that one out first. But don't forget to come back, because today is the main event. We get the unusual chance to be a fly on the wall and listen in on Jenn and Todd's conversation with their dad, Bruce. And yes, they all gave us permission to do this. And then we're going to offer a little ringside commentary along the way. To be clear, this conversation is edited. Their talk was about 3 hours in real life, which is very impressive, but a little long for a single podcast episode. So we tried to pull out the most meaningful moments, for better and for worse, so we can all learn from their example.
Because a few weeks back, you sent an email called, I used to be a normal person. It's like, I used to be a normal person, but I came from a white, privileged upbringing, and so now I'm a racist and responsible for slavery. And then it kept going through, I used to be this, but now I'm an Islamophobe or whatever. And I read that.
The change of definition, what may have meant something in the 1950s, 70s, 2000, and now, the same words that used to be somewhat benign have become inflammatory. Or the issues...
Can I pause us real quick? I'm sorry, not to... I want to, get us into a new conversation flow, so I just want to, finish the thought of what I was saying.
Okay, so for those of you listening at home, maybe try to play along with us. Notice when you hear something different from the usual political discourse these days. How are they trying to get underneath the talking points, to maybe even answer the big mystery. Why is our dad forwarding us these politically provocative emails? What does he really want?
Blood pressure rising, kind of sweaty hands, kind of feeling really mad. And I had this moment of like, should I respond? How should I respond? And Todd sent me an email back with some of his ideas of what he would say, but he didn't send it. And it did make me wonder in a sincerely curious way, like, what are your goals in sending those emails, or what are your intentions in sending those emails to folks?
I like to listen to all the sides, and I take it almost like reading a Far Side comic. There's obviously some reality within the statement, as absurd as it can be. And I think that's where, instead of just reading it and kind of taking it as a light brush, it becomes a heavy canvas. It's like, oh, those are really your beliefs. Well, no, it's just kind of a comment on how this definition or movement or comments are being inflammatory, when it used to be kind of a semi-joke or just a, it's interesting that you're getting all upset because I said black, white, Jewish. Everything seems to have an edge.
Well, so if I can play back and make sure I understand you right, are you saying you're sending that email to all of us and, family and some friends as well, because it's a way of you wanting to show, here's what some people are thinking, or is this what you think? I'm curious to know, like, not the content of the email, but, this is one of many political emails.
What I want to know is what causes someone, in this case you in particular, to have received that email and think, I need to send this on.
I think I'm trying to stir the pot more than I'm trying to do anything, of saying, I haven't been able to communicate to you guys that there's this much difference. I don't understand what happened to respect, responsibility, and compromise.
So just getting back to the emails, it sounds like you're saying you're not entirely made up in your mind, but your hope in sending this stuff along, which you may resonate with on some level, is to have the recipients consider kind of what some people are feeling. Is that right?
Yes. I think it's more, here's a perspective from a different source, and usually I'm sending it from the opposite side.
What do you mean the opposite?
More conservative.
The opposite side of like Todd and I?
More self-determining, where I feel you guys are more for social equality. I believe in opportunity, but I also believe that the individual is still the most important aspect, and I don't like giving up individual respect, responsibility, and obligation to a government, a religion, or any of that.
And I understand that, and I guess the disconnect I still feel is, how does that goal get achieved by sending inflammatory, contextless emails? And that's where I get tripped up by this stuff, because you and I will have a lot of very in-depth conversations, and we'll emerge from those fundamentally agreeing on a lot of our core values, and I'll feel pretty good about it. And then a few days later, I'll get some insane right-wing email forward with no context, no explanation, no preamble, and I'm like, okay, we're back to square zero.
Maybe that's because you're taking it as that those are my beliefs.
Because there's nothing to tell me they're not. There's no framing or context of the message.
And that's somewhat by intent.
Is it?
Yeah.
So, Monica, any thoughts listening to this initial back and forth?
I mean, wow. I was already pretty riveted. I wanted to keep hearing it. There it was. 3
more hours.
I know, that's a lot. But I mean, that felt to me like a pretty good launch.
Already, you can hear Jenn and Todd start to use a few of Monica's techniques. But will it be enough? After a quick break, we'll hear some more and then start to analyze what's landing and what isn't. Don't go anywhere.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
According to the EPA, the indoor air we breathe can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air. So what's the solution? Introducing Air Doctor, the air purifier that filters out 99.99% of dangerous contaminants so your lungs don't have to. This includes allergens and pollen, pet dander, dust mites, and I actually have an Air Doctor that I've been using at home, and it has been kind of fantastic. We have a dog, and then we have neighbors who bring over their big dogs. And so before they come in, if I turn on the Air Doctor, then I'm fine. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so if you don't love it, just send it back for a refund minus shipping. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code HOWTO, and you'll receive up to $300 off air purifiers. Exclusive to podcast customers, you will also receive a 3-year warranty on any unit, which is an additional $84 value. Lock this special offer by going to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code HOWTO. That's airdoctorpro.com and use promo code HOWTO.
We're back with author Mónica Guzmán, our conflict whisperer, who's listening to the tape of Jenn and Todd trying to change how they talk to their dad about politics.
I noticed, Jen, when you interrupted and said, can I pause us real quick before you started diving into the content? I mean, your dad wanted to react as soon as you brought up the emails and wanted to explain some piece of it, but you very delicately just brought him back to say, okay, can we reiterate the goals of the whole conversation? And that was notable. Definitely noticed too when you got to that question very clearly. You had communicated the physical response that you get with the email, and that made me curious. What are your goals when you send this? And so from there, it was really interesting because he seemed to be exploring his way to an answer, which he eventually got to at the end of a couple of minutes. Mm-hmm. But you were really listening to help guide him toward that answer. And you interrupted at one point to paraphrase or loop.
Looping is a deep listening technique that I've learned from conflict mediators, and now I use it all the time, and I've trained hundreds of journalists on it. Essentially, anytime you're having a conversation with any emotion, it's a really useful way to prove to the other person that you're trying to get them. First, you distill what they're telling you into the most elegant language you can muster. Then, and this is the most important part, check to see if you got it right. There's a bunch of reasons for doing this, all of them backed up by the research. But the bottom line is, people need to feel heard before they will listen. If you do this, if you earnestly try to get them, you will stay present, you will actually be listening, not thinking of your next point, and you will show them that you're really trying. It lowers people's guard. Let's revisit this example of Jenn looping her dad.
It sounds like you're saying, you're not entirely made up in your mind, but your hope in sending this stuff along, which you may resonate with on some level, is to have the recipients consider kind of what some people are feeling. Is that right?
Jenn and Todd, what were you thinking listening to this a second time?
Listening to it a second time, I feel like I heard him more deeply and heard some other points that I didn't quite hear in the moment, because I was kind of looking for, like, have you actually thought about why you're sending this? And I think at the end of the day, the answer is I have a sense, but I haven't articulated it even to myself. Like, I don't exactly know why I'm doing it, but I feel compelled. And, we got to the reasons why. And what was really surprising and helpful for me was hearing that he himself had not made up his mind and that he felt confused, which is something I think that takes a degree of vulnerability, to say, I don't know what I think. And I'm sending these as some kind of a way to be like, wow, let's engage on this topic, even though, like Todd said, there's no context. So we would have not known that was his goal. But that was really illuminating for me, because he is someone who is pretty, declarative in how he feels and doesn't often say things like, I'm confused. And that was nice to hear and made me soften toward him. knowing that he could admit that, which was a nice surprise.
So what I heard there was a little bit of roundabout, out loud thinking to disclaim responsibility for the emails.
That too.
And basically saying, these aren't my opinions. This is just somebody else. And I'm not even sure what to think. And it kind of goes along with the like, hey, I'm just asking questions, model of inflammatory rhetoric that we hear. So that's kind of what I took from it was.
Did it felt to you like a dodge?
Yeah. I sent this thing. I could tell it upset you guys. So I don't want you to think that I did this on purpose. So I'm just going to say I threw it out there as just, as a food for thought.
He started by saying, yeah, I've been trying to stir the pot. He said, I haven't been able to communicate something about the importance I give to respect, responsibility, and compromise. He said what seemed like a really resonant kind of value statement. I believe, you all are about social equality, and I believe in opportunity, but I believe that the individual is the most important aspect. So that was sort of a value statement that he seems to want. I don't know, I wondered if he just wanted that acknowledged somehow.
Values are really important, but not as simple as they sound. In Monica's book, she highlights the work of Israeli social psychologist Shalom Schwartz, who condenses a seemingly infinite amount of human values into just 10, including hedonism, achievement, power, security, and conformity. What makes us each different is where we rank each value, which guides our behavior, and also how we judge other people based on their rankings. Monica's advice is to stop assuming that people who disagree with us don't value what we value. Instead, ask the question, what do they value more?
I guess the disconnect I still feel is how does that goal get achieved by sending inflammatory, contextless emails?
What's frustrating to me is that you thought a lot of what I was sending were my beliefs because they were kind of meant to be, hey, there's this whole world out here of people who have these thoughts. Why? And instead of me requesting information or response or giving you a little bit of background to why I was sending them, you're going like, is he trying to tell us this is how we should be, or that's how he is, or that's...
Well, how would we know otherwise?
Point in case, we didn't spend the time to say it. You didn't have the time to call me back and say, are you nuts? I mean, sometimes you would do it in a text or an email saying, here's this. And we started doing that fractionation. Hey, look at this. Hey, look at that. Hey, look. And all of a sudden we became frictional instead of saying, is this really what you believe?
Todd, you asked a really challenging question. How does that goal get achieved when you send inflammatory, context-less emails? And I wondered for a moment if he was going to get defensive at that point. And he didn't, which was interesting. So maybe that's because, okay, he gets it. He's, this isn't new to him. But then you got into what seemed to me a really rich exchange, because he was hearing more from you about how this comes off. And he seemed to be, looking into himself a little bit to try to wrestle that dissonance. What is he trying to get out of you? If this is getting a rise out of you, what is the good of that? And he said, well, maybe it's because the impression you have is that these are my beliefs. And he's coming back to, he's claiming some uncertainty here, which you have to kind of decide because you said, well, maybe he's dodging, right? So then I wondered what was going through your head. So that's a question I have, is what was going through your head? Did you still think it was a dodge, or was something getting filled in that was a blank?
I did still hear these aren't my opinions, but they actually are, but I just didn't write this. Someone else wrote it. So I get to hide behind the cover of saying, see, other people feel this way, not just me.
I'm curious, Todd, I could be wrong here, but I feel like I'm hearing you say on the one hand that he is dodging here. In fact, he does believe these things from these emails. And these are pretty rightward emails. And he's kind of sort of shirking responsibility for his real beliefs. And then I'm also hearing you say, actually, when you really listen to him, his values are on the left. So which is it, do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough question. Because I think where a lot of the confusion for his generation comes with things just like language, and words you're allowed to use to describe people or cultures, where I think it's a hard thing for them to overcome and say, well, we've always just call them this, now derogatory or inflammatory word. And we don't mean anything by it. It's just what they are. And then when they hear, well, you're not allowed to use that word anymore, they feel lost and confused and like they can't speak without getting chided by people for using the wrong language.
They don't
and
belong.
I think for a lot of people that's really threatening, and it's really disconcerting.
Well, nobody wants to feel like they don't belong. Yeah, that's
right.
Kind of It sounds like what you're saying is that he's neither nor. Like he's conservative in some ways, let's say with his attachment to labels or old ways of talking about people and understanding the world, right? And then progressive in other ways when it comes to some of his core values. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah, I think that's a fair way to say it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because our sort of current culture, you can't be that.
Right.
You got to be one or the other. And I realize now when I asked you the question, I was like, which is it, Todd? Yeah. It's like, oh my God, I'm doing the thing. It's not, right? That doesn't actually fit him.
That's You're hitting on something, Amanda, that I heard anew in this exchange and then in Todd's answer, which is that, there is something that happens between the values that you have taken in as a person and experienced in your life, and then when they become language, and then when they become labels, and then when those labels become weapons, that is violent and dehumanizing on a level. And I think he's trying to rally against that. And at the end of the day, in my perspective, and Todd, tell me if I'm wrong here, but like, there's a certain amount of the conversational dynamics we've had before have been in this kind of debate, like let's win, let's argue. But if we take that off the table and we just have the goal to be to understand one another, then like we can't actually have a tidy label for what dad is or either of us are or anybody is. And that can feel unsatisfying and like there's no winning, so to speak. But on a level, I feel like that is more true.
Last week, we were reminded that everyone wants to feel understood, to be seen, especially by their loved ones. One way to understand each other better is to move beyond recycled political views and instead ask each other for stories. How do we get those views? That's exactly what Jenn and Todd did.
Reframe that a little bit.
So I'm curious to know here. I actually have a question here. When did you first start to think of yourself as a conservative?
I feel I'm conservative in some ways and liberal in others. So I don't identify myself with being a liberal or conservative.
When did you first start identifying as a Republican?
It would be midlife, probably, 30s, 40s. What I think I always go back to is when I see my relatives, they were all small business people. They all tended to be from ethnic backgrounds of some type or another. Like with your mother, I was born and raised in Skokie, but being a Catholic. So I was a minority in the majority. And I was also a working man's kid amongst very elite people as far as socioeconomic structures. So I was always the kid working my way up. And that's what I'm struggling with now is I say, well, okay, I brought up my kids to be conservative. They had to earn their way to some extent. I wanted to give you that personal pride because there's nothing like the satisfaction of accomplishing something.
Where do you think the idea comes from that people who are more liberal or democratic don't want to work hard, don't want to accomplish, don't want to be self-reliant, and just want to have everything handed to them? Where do you think that comes from? Because my personal belief is that's completely not true.
Well, it's as not true as that a conservative doesn't care about social activities and doesn't want to help those in need and doesn't want to have better education and that. It's like we're saying, well, you guys don't care about this and you guys don't care about this, yet both do. And the real difference is, how do you accomplish that?
I'm really floored by, Todd, you presented the stereotype against folks on your side that they don't, the liberals don't value work, want things handed to them. And his answer to where does that come from was to turn it around and point to a stereotype against his side And I found that so revealing. So interesting.
Yep. Whataboutism in a bucket.
I mean, wow. What did you think of in that moment? Because were you expecting like him to really reflect on where that came from for him, and then you got this different answer that implicated you, or at least liberals?
Yeah, I was hoping to get a little more reflection into like, how do you think that stereotype came to be? And instead it went to a whataboutism. I remember during the conversation being a little disappointed, but not surprised.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. The other thing was just the fact that he started to go into his background, the 30s, the 40s, you know, we were business people. I felt like a minority because I was a Catholic and I was a working man's kid, you know, among other folks. And that was really interesting.
I was really appreciative of him starting to tell us more about what shaped him. And I actually got some new stories from him after that, which I hadn't heard before, that his grandfather was a communist and was part of like one of the first unionizing efforts in America, in Chicago, as a garment worker on the factory floor. And I was like, whoa, let's go into this more. This is interesting.
That's cool.
Like your grandpa told you he was a communist on a fishing trip? Like, whoa, let's talk about that. So that was cool. I really want to return to that the next time we have a conversation and try and get some more of that family history.
These glimpses of our own personal histories beyond the same old talking points, that's exactly what we're looking for. Because, you know, we could argue all day about inflation or deficit spending, but we're mostly repeating what we've heard other people say. It's more interesting and revealing to talk about how we got there, what matters most to us, who we believe and who we trust.
Todd, I'm curious about, what if it isn't a deflection? What if it is an answer to the question? It's just coming in a different form. What might that mean? What could be the thing he's trying to communicate with that, by bringing up that other stereotype that actually is an answer, but sort of comes off, you know, or could be defined as this sort of frustrating whataboutism. You're just deflecting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the point he's making, which isn't untrue, is, you know, we tend to paint with broad brushes and, you know, categorize people according to, you know, a high level set of beliefs that isn't true across the board. And there's validity there, but I don't think it adds much to the original point, which was, you know, where do you think these ideas and these stereotypes come from?
Right. It makes me wonder if you found a way to come back and say, well, by the way, you know, you brought up this other stereotype, which granted, but I really do want to know, where do you think that this idea that liberal, you know, were you ever able to bring it back, or did it feel like he just wanted nothing to do with it?
Yeah, I think we just kind of went on to another topic. I wish now with hindsight that we would have gone back to it to try to unpack it a little bit more.
So in other words, if you feel like you're not being heard, maybe because someone's dodging your question, try making them feel heard first, and then come back to your question. The beauty of a conversation is that it's not linear. It's always imperfect. Frustration is part of the deal, and sometimes emotions boil over, as we're going to hear right after the break.
Some people think self-care is indulgent. You know firsthand that's a myth. And you know what else is a myth? That Discover isn't widely accepted. The truth is, Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. You heard that right, 99%. And every time you make a purchase with your card, you automatically earn cash back. What better excuse to take your self-care Sunday out of the house and into the occasional spa visit? It pays to Discover, based on the February 2024 Nielsen report. Learn more at discover.com/creditcard.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today? Smart choice. Progressive loves to help people make smart choices. And that's why they offer a tool called Auto Quote Explorer that allows you to compare your Progressive car insurance quote with rates from other companies. So you can save time on the research and can enjoy savings when you choose the best rate for you. Give it a try after this episode at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states and situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Oh, it's such a clutch off-season pickup, Dave.
I was worried we'd bring back the same team.
I meant those blackout motorized shades.
Blinds.com made it crazy affordable to replace our old blinds.
Hard to install?
No, it's easy. I installed these and then got some for my mom. She talked to a design consultant for free and scheduled a professional measure and install.
Hall of Fame son.
They're the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings in the world.
Blinds.com is the GOAT.
Shop up to 45% off select styles, plus a free professional measure during the Blinds.com year-end blowout. Rules and restrictions may apply.
We're back with Jenn and Todd, siblings who want to change how they debate politics with their dad, and Mónica Guzmán, author of I Never Thought of It That Way. Now, it wouldn't be a real family argument without a little heat. In the snippet you're about to hear, Todd and his dad Bruce start talking about immigration.
You know, the Democrats want to leave the open borders because they get more votes, because they support those people and they come over here. So they get the vote. I understand you're shaking your head saying, no, that doesn't happen on that.
They don't vote. They can't.
What do you mean they can't?
They're not citizens.
They're not citizens.
So they can't vote.
Okay. Technically speaking, you're correct. When do they become able to vote?
When they're citizens.
Right.
So if you're not a citizen and you're here illegally, you cannot vote. And guess what those people are unwilling to do? Get anywhere near a polling station out of fear of getting deported. So this whole boogeyman of the open borders are to increase Democratic votes is unmitigated bullshit.
Short term, yes. Long term, no.
You know how long it takes to become a citizen?
5 to 7 years. It's hard.
This is where I get really riled up.
But their kids are citizens.
I'm correct, and that takes them 18 years to vote. So if you think these border policies are a vote harvesting program, is beyond absurd.
But I think that's, if you take the grand scheme, it's a huge issue, but it's not really a large percentage of population or situation. It's a small percentage.
It's almost nothing, but it gets an outsized influence because it's emotional, and I'm getting pissed.
It's inflated. Okay.
I feel like we're arguing now.
This is you're getting riled up, and I'm trying to understand.
But you're not. You're making declarative statements of fact, which is completely wrong.
And
like the one about immigrants voting. They don't. So this is where I want to have more dialogue between us instead of going tit for tat with points when the points are completely wrong.
So how did it become a popular theme of the influence of this small percentage of immigration issue?
Oh, I wonder why. How could it become a popular theme?
Maybe take the attitude out and answer it.
Okay, yes. How did it... Because there are people who have a very strong interest in getting votes and getting people to believe things that aren't true for the furtherance of their own power. And I'll leave you to guess who those people might be.
Okay, and I think we're kind of getting root cause here.
So, this is a great example, right? I mean, you can sort of feel the, sort of simmering, seething frustration. Todd, how are you feeling, even just listening to this now? How are you feeling then, and how are you feeling now?
Oh, God, so mad, so embarrassed. So, everything came swimming back right then. Because that's where we started getting candid. Because I think it was, we had been talking for a while, so it was almost like we got comfortable with the setup and the fact that there were microphones and we were doing this for a thing. And that's where I think it was a little more real. And that's where it was a little more depressing to hear. Is this is the true belief. And it's not true.
Mm-hmm. And I really appreciate how you just said embarrassing, because I think that's what makes the family dimension, right, so much more painful, right? It's one thing, like you said earlier, if some random person has thoughts that I think are ignorant. But when it's your dad, right, that's very different. And so it just is just a totally different feeling about, am I a good person? Is he a good person? Are we good people? What does it mean? What does it all mean if he's saying these things? And I will also add that there was just a touch of judgment I heard in the tape, words like absurd, unmitigated bullshit. Those are
A touch? I thought it was pretty thick judgment. I'm not proud of how I came off there. Like, I was being a jerk. And it was hard not to.
It's interesting, right? It sounds like the more you feel this way of frustration, anger, exasperation, embarrassment, the more judgment he's going to get in response. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a totally normal human response, but the key to interrupting this spiral is to just slow it down any way you can. Grab a drink, take the dog out, crack a joke, whatever. Maybe, I don't know, set up a tape recorder. That seemed to help here in a weird way.
I mean, luckily we never got anyone walking out of the room, which has happened in the past. So
thank you, tape recorder.
Yeah, thank you, tape recorder, for playing referee. I recommend everyone listening say we're going to record this just in case. But I remember, like, not even on the not on the negative side of emotions of like anger or frustration, but I think I felt, for the first time in a long time, softened toward my dad. Every time, we have these kinds of conversations, I end up kind of rolling my eyes, whether literally or figuratively, and just being like, it's not worth it. And to me, some of the tools and the techniques you all taught us for how to listen and how to actually ask and probe felt like a positive challenge that actually yielded some softening and some depth. And I felt a softening toward my dad in a way that I hadn't for a while. I felt like I'd grown a pretty calcified layer of my heart and mind between him. And there was this moment in, the conversation where we asked him, because, Todd and I both have done a lot of thinking and working in these spaces and have a lot to say about it. And when my dad will throw out these rhetorical, well, you can't trust anyone, or you can't know this. And we're like, actually, you can. And are you curious to ask us? Like, we've both felt a little bit like, man, you're saying you're thirsty and I have a gallon of water here. Like, come, I'm inviting you. And he won't take it.
So just to explain the backstory here, Jenn is a veteran journalist and also an entrepreneur who works in many ways to make the news media better, more trustworthy. So it's especially painful when her dad doesn't seem to look to her for insight. Just take a listen.
Etc. And I just have to say, the industry that I'm in, the quote unquote media, when you say the media is this, you're talking about me, and you're talking about my colleagues, and you're talking about people who I see busting their asses and putting themselves in harm's way to get facts, to get reality, to report the hell out of things in a way with extreme integrity and process.
Yes, I should try to research where and how it is to get that.
Or you ask me, I can help you. Like, this is what I do.
I'm very proud of the fact of what you guys have become of yourselves. I'm somewhat intimidated by it because I feel somewhat inadequate because I don't have the depth of inquiry and exposure that you guys have.
But do you feel like it has to be a tit for tat or a competition versus me understand this? You guys have studied this. Help me understand.
I really appreciate you saying that, Dad. And so how can we make it less intimidating?
When we're able to go into depth, I think what always ends up happening is we come to a conclusion that says, they're not crazy. They're not so outside of compassion, caring, and will.
Who's they, again?
Me. That I'm not, when I'm sending those things, I think it's somewhat saying, look at these intelligent people who are sending this stuff. I mean, this is coming from people who are educated, successful. I'm kind of throwing this out saying, I'm not alone out here.
Wow.
Monica.
Oh, wow. Guys, this is, oh my gosh. Okay, where to begin? This felt huge. I mean, for him to say, I feel somewhat inadequate. The truth is that I think I feel somewhat inadequate. First of all, I find it hard to believe that could have happened in a shorter conversation.
Definitely not.
That felt like something you had to get to. Jenn, I love that you've been using the word softening. I wonder if softening was happening all around here.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is not an easy thing to admit, like you said, to your children. I love that you followed up by thanking him. I appreciate you saying that, Dad. I know that that's probably tough. I I mean, that was amazing. And for that to come after you and Todd, I think, passionately, these pieces of tape, telling him how it feels. When we hear these things from you, it's particularly frustrating because you could come to us and we could talk about it, and we're not able to have these conversations. There's declarative statements instead of questions, so there's no room for us in here. But man, that statement about I feel somewhat inadequate just speaks volumes to me. There's a moment with my mother that this reminds me of, because we were starting to talk about something politically contentious, and I was ready to go, like this was going to be fun. And then she just kind of gave this really deep sigh. And I could tell that she did not feel the way I did, that this was going to be fun to talk about. And I kind of asked her, like, wait, what's going on? And she's like, well, I don't really know why I bother, Monica. Like, you're a journalist, you're an expert communicator. It just feels like you're too good. You're too good. So why should I even engage? And he doesn't want to put himself in that situation, and my mom doesn't want to put herself in that situation, right? No one would want to put themselves in that situation where they feel inadequate.
When I interview conservatives around the country, that is a theme.
Yes.
Is like one of the things they're most dreading when they come to a Braver Angels conversation or Thanksgiving or wherever they encounter people they disagree with politically. They're pretty sure that at some point they're going to be judged and they're going to be condescended to. And that is the thing that comes up again and again and again. And there are other things that come up on the left, right? And everybody's different, but that's a theme. And I wonder, I mean, do you think that he's wrong to feel like there's judgment in these conversations?
No, I don't think he's wrong. I think there is judgment.
Yeah.
I agree.
I think that's absolutely true. I think not just us personally, I think our cohort, one of the reasons there's such a strong divide is, you said it exactly right, people feel judged and condescended to, and like, the woke police are after them. And that's really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And I think it is a disservice, that is asymmetrical in a way of, you need to give people an on-ramp. And if they don't feel like there's an on-ramp, then they're not going to come with you.
Right. There's an author, John Rauch, who says something I've been like munching on, right? He's conservative, but he says that the overwhelming emotion on the right is anger, and the overwhelming emotion on the left is contempt. And I've been thinking about that one for a while. Like, oh, in which ways is it true? In which ways is it not? But so much of this is ultimately emotion and whether we do feel understood by the people close to us. So yeah, his emails are making some sense. It's really interesting.
So remember, the goal of this whole thing was to understand each other a little better and be a little better understood. Because political battles, especially in families, are almost always a proxy for something else. And toward the end of their conversation, Todd and his dad finally got to what that something else might be.
Generally speaking, taking it out of politics and everything, like we talk on the phone fairly regularly. What I would love to have us be able to do is more of those questions. How are you doing? How's your job? How's work? How are you feeling about things? Instead of a 20-minute monologue about your trip to the doctor, which, yes, I'm interested in your health, but I don't need every last detail about your knee doctor. But I would really love to have more conversations about how are you dealing with moving across the country? How's your daughter doing in school? And I feel like those are more like afterthoughts instead of just, here's word vomit about everything that's going on in my day, which I care. I want to know how you're doing and all this stuff, but I don't need details about your golf group. I want to know about you, and I want you to ask me about me.
Well said.
How does that feel to, I guess, receive that?
It opens my eyes. It says, and why I'm doing it or how I'm doing it, habit, dictum, I don't know. Because I think how much I care.
Yeah,
and
I do.
want to be involved. Yet I'm being a poor communicator, or I'm not getting the proper exchange that I really feel and want to have. And I guess, to me, my actions are good. My communication is weak.
Wow, dirty laundry from the family.
Had you told him this before in so many words?
Maybe not as directly.
Yeah.
I'll probably be indirect and sigh or kind of like, all right, yep, you've already told me that 6 times. Let's go something else. Which doesn't probably sound very good. I don't know. I think I sound pretty mean in that segment too. So. Yeah.
Oh, really? How did it feel, like his reaction? How did that land?
I appreciated that he didn't fire back, that he actually took it and said, that's a fair point and I need to think about that and do it more. I don't know that it'll actually change anything.
It's funny because it sounds like you feel like this is a little bit separate from the other conversation. But I heard it, and I could be totally way off, but I heard it as the same conversation. Like, it felt to me like your dad, like so many dads, is everywhere, is trying to connect through monologues or politics or, sort of weather, and it's not landing. That's not how people connect. And you're literally giving him the words, which I just thought was beautiful. It's like, how's your daughter doing in school? How are you doing with moving across the country? And these are things that, we wish people just knew. But there's a generational and a gender thing here, right? Where, I don't know that men his age are all well trained in how to do this. So sometimes politics becomes the thing you can easily go to, right? Even when it's the exact wrong thing to go to.
And this is interesting. Culture, what we share, has gotten really fractured. And so politics is oddly one of the things that holds us together, which is a laughable idea, right? Because at least we all kind of sort of see the same headlines, This reminds me of my father in the last couple decades of his father's life, my grandfather, would look up the soccer scores for Mexican soccer teams that he had stopped caring about a long time ago, just so he could talk to his dad. That's how they could connect. So yeah, there's such a gift in getting to a place in a conversation where you're able to give each other the user manual on connection. Here's what actually works with me. It's a pretty tough thing to be able to say, and I don't know. I hope it's feedback that's taken to heart.
When you get down to the root of it, it's a lot less about, actual political disagreements and more about being disconnected and then getting polarized into groups that, there's other motives to get those groups to not like each other.
Yeah.
Jen, what are your thoughts?
I was surprised how much of an actual thrill and how much easier it was to do after we kind of got over the initial hump and just got into it. And there was some kind of a thing where I'm like, I want to do this again. There was something so gratifying about getting to the meaning and getting to the heart of some things and breaking new territory. That was a beautiful byproduct I didn't expect. I was like, okay, we'll do one of these and we'll see if we can do one again in 5 years. And now I'm like, no, let's do this again. Like, I'm game. The other thing I thought was just like, I should remind myself of this all the time, and that it's okay to have written notes in a high stakes conversation. And I knew that if I got into the heat of things, my neocortex would go offline and I would not have access to the great advice you both gave. And I would just kind of go primitive. And so I wrote down some of the questions in a phrasing that I wouldn't have done myself. And I referenced them and I said, I'm going to have notes here. And there's nothing illegal about having notes for a conversation.
Yeah. Right. Why would we prepare notes and think ahead for every other hard conversation in life except this one, right?
I feel like another insight from this whole experience was just about having a conversation about the conversation going in, and then a conversation about the conversation at the end of just, I don't know, whether it sounds hokey or not, I don't care. I think it's helpful, is to appreciate what went well.
Yeah, I hope that does come across, that even though, we heard just segments, it's important, I think, to recognize that you can't get to these segments quickly. You need to go through the mess. And I think that's part of what scares people, the mess. But a conversation is forgiving. And I think we forget that too. Especially, thank you social media, right? We have a lot to thank social media for. And one of those things is the idea that we can't edit ourselves, that we can't We can't, say something to make what we said earlier more of what we meant to say. But a conversation does allow for that. It can take a lot of missteps. It can handle it. And you'll find out what you're really talking about.
Have you heard from your dad? How do you think this went for him?
I was with him. On Saturday. We were at a birthday party together.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Well, tell me the freshest, because I think I spoke to him before.
We didn't talk about it. It didn't come up.
I did speak to my dad, and I did say, okay, let's talk about how'd that conversation go for you? And overall, he said it gave him a lot to think about, and he had been thinking about it. And he said he wanted us to have a less one-sided conversation the next time and to ask more questions of us, which to me was like, ding, ding, ding. I just wanted to do one of those like hops where I click my feet together, but I'm too old and I would injure myself if I tried. But that felt really good to know that was one of the takeaways. And he also, of course, then went on for 20 minutes about how he thinks democracy needs saving and what his plan would be. But those other things were in there too, which is new.
Hey, Jen, it's Dad. I listened to the podcast, Chapter 1, and was very impressed. I didn't realize how you were coached by such eloquent sponsors. I'm glad we were able to have a conversation uninterrupted by any outside influences, phones, emails, texts, people, kids. That gave us the attention to really talk. Identifying that you were so offended by things that I felt were just kind of bear poking. So I apologize for being divisive, but my goal was under no circumstances to make you feel that those were my total viewpoints. Basically, I think if we took 70% as a number picked out of the air, of Americans want the same things. We're good moral people who are trying to build a better country and do it through our elected officials who are no longer public servants. And I think that's probably what distresses me both, that both parties have chosen this path of extremism on either side so that they can get that last ounce of vote to win power and then not come back to the table and conciliatorily affect good government. And that's what I think we all need to attack, is hold our elected officials accountable for what they're doing to our country and our money. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Bruce. You have just done, along with your kids, what so many of our elected officials have not yet done, which is to come to the table and have a real conversation with dignity and respect about what really matters. Thank you for showing us how it's done. And thank you to Mónica Guzmán for being such a patient and wise guide and so generous with her time. Definitely check out her book, I Never Thought of It That Way: How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. Finally, thank you. Yes, I'm talking to you for listening. I hope you found this helpful and hopefully feel a tiny bit more prepared heading out into the world during the midterms and Thanksgiving and whatever comes next. We'd love to hear from you if you try out any of these techniques, even if they don't work the way you wanted them to. We're very interested. We're always interested. Send us a note at howto@slate.com or leave us a voicemail at 646-495-4001. That's also where you can always reach us with any other hard problems that you need help solving. How To's executive producer is Derek John. Rosemary Belson and Kevin Bendis produced this episode. Merritt Jacob is senior technical director. Charles Duhigg created the show. I'm Amanda Ripley. Thanks for listening.